For USCFootball.com, I'm Jack Smith alongside Connor Morrissette for instant analysis from USC's Tuesday practice and media interview period of Rutgers week. It's a short week today, so it's a late night practice. We didn't get to see any of the practice, and we won't be able to see anything this week. There are no media viewing periods, so we'll report on what we saw from the tunnel as well as the interviews after practice, but Connor, nothing from inside the practice walls today.
Yeah, and it's not like we can usually see too much. The most informative thing is usually that scout team drill on the second day that we can watch practice, which is usually Wednesday, but it would be Tuesday this week, and then you can see who the first-team quarterback is and what that first-team offensive line looks like. And we do see some defensive back drills, so we can see sort of who's in line to start and who's with the top groups. But, yeah, that's it. And at this point in the season, nothing really changes, and I'll just get to this now. Miller Moss is still going to start against Rutgers. I know a lot of USC fans are frustrated with the quarterback position, but Lincoln Riley said 100% that Miller will start against Rutgers. I've been on the record about this a lot. I think that's the right move, and we can get into that maybe a little bit later, Jack. But, yeah, the only thing that we saw coming out of the tunnel today, Marcellus Williams was out of his scout team jersey. I think he's going to be the third cornerback this week if things with some of the injuries to these cornerbacks keep going the way it looks like it's going. USC was down a couple of those guys today, so look for maybe Marcellus Williams to have a role against Rutgers.
Yeah, Lincoln Riley did mention to us, it was the first question of his press conference, will Miller Moss start? And he said, oh yeah, like it was any kind of question. And you've mentioned you've been on the record saying you think Miller Moss should be the starter. I would too. I think he has been one of the better players on the offense. I don't think he's the problem. And as Lincoln Riley mentioned, if Woody Marks catches that ball and they lead that game-winning drive, he would have thrown for over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. Obviously, that one bad pick, but he would have led a game-winning drive, and USC would be above 500. So I personally have never once this season thought Miller Moss was the problem. I also think this specific week would probably be the worst time all season to do a quarterback change. Coming off of a tough loss on a short week, it just never made sense for me. This season, I don't think Miller Moss has been the problem, so I can understand maybe why some people would want to see what's in Jaden Mayava, but as Lincoln mentioned, as Miller Moss mentioned, quarterback gets a lot of the scrutiny because of the record, but I personally don't think Miller Moss is the problem, and this wouldn't have been the week to do it, in my opinion.
And could he be better? Hell yeah. He's made some critical errors the last 3 weeks and all these losses, bad turnovers in every one of those games, but I just keep going back to it's a systematic problem right now. And Lincoln Riley talked about it when he was asked, how can you close out games? What needs to change? He said there's so much that we can do a little bit better. It's not just one thing you can point at. And to me, that's what I feel like with the quarterback situation right now. Yes, Moss has thrown some costly interceptions, but the offensive line at some points has just been brutal this year. They're in the hundreds for pressure rate on the year. They just had some big mistakes, especially early in that Maryland game. So I look at that. I look at Riley as the play caller. Yes, USC has a lot of RPOs, so Miller Moss throwing 50 times, some of that is in his hands. But if you're Lincoln Riley, you need to call more design runs. And Riley didn't really address that directly today, but he said it's probably not ideal for the quarterback to throw it 50 times. So I look at the play calling, the offensive line. Defensively, USC keeps running out of gas in the second half. There's no pass rush. On the list of issues, quarterback for me is way down the list, and I'm excited to see all the YouTube people say, oh, what are you guys talking about? You don't know what you're talking about. I think if Lincoln Riley doesn't think there needs to be a quarterback change, then there doesn't need to be a quarterback change. But USC 3-4 right now, things could be getting a lot better, of course. It doesn't seem like they're changing a whole lot.
Yeah, and Miller Moss is kind of inviting you guys to fill up our comment section with criticism of him. He said people around our program are seeking negativity, that they want to say negative things about the USC football program. He says he hopes they'll keep that same energy going forward. So if that's you, let us know in the comments. But he seems confident in himself still. He mentioned they did a lot of good things, and people asked about him throwing the ball down the field more, and he said when the defense shows you that, you have to take those shots. He took a lot of questions. I thought he handled them in stride pretty well, and I asked him and Lincoln Riley the same question, which is that Caleb Williams last year and Lincoln Riley both mentioned the word consistency to us a ton. It's what Lincoln Riley thought that Caleb could improve on coming off of his Heisman campaign, and it felt like every week Caleb would remind us that's something he was working on. And so I asked Lincoln and Miller to evaluate how Miller and the offense was able to play with consistency this year, and they both had the same answer, despite the fact I don't think they were trained to say the same thing. He said, we have had spurts where we've been really good, but just have not been able to put together 4 quarters, and so we haven't been a consistent offense. I was able to follow up with Miller and ask asked what he thinks the main obstacle has been, and he said the frustrating part has just been the fact that when they haven't been able to finish games or when they haven't been consistent, it's not like it's one specific thing popping up every time. And I think that's kind of the story of the season and the most frustrating thing for USC this year. Last year, it was obvious the defense was the problem. You fix the defense, you fix the season. They weren't able to do it last year, but it was still the clear problem. This year, I don't think there is a clear problem, despite the fact that USC's got a worse record through 7 games. I think they fixed the defense for the most part, but you can't point to the same exact thing and on all 4 losses that has been the main problem for why USC has fallen.
And Miller talks about that, which makes a lot of sense. Injuries have, of course, played a big role in USC struggling too, but I'm just sick of the message boards and the commenters. Like, I remember when Miller had the great game against LSU and the great game against Louisville, like there's Heisman talk, and he's such a great Trojan. He waited his turn. He's earned this. And then for people to flip on this guy when he started 7 or 8 games now in his career, like there were always going to be growing pains. The offensive line's experiencing growing pains. Moss, he's in his first year starting, and I know people aren't happy with Lincoln Riley right now, but he does know his quarterbacks, and if he really felt like Jaden Maiava gave the team a better chance to win, he'd be in there. So beating a dead horse at this point, but as far as Lincoln Riley and USC are concerned today, doesn't really sound like there's much quarterback controversy at all, which again I think is the right move. I understand when people are upset because, look, Moss hasn't been tremendous at times this season, especially in some of these losses, but I felt like he was really good in that Michigan game outside of the interception, of course, and he was under constant pressure, and maybe that's sort of affected his confidence a little bit, and now you have a great opponent in Rutgers to get your confidence back. Rutgers kind of stinks. I thought Maryland kind of stunk too, and USC, of course, lost that one. But, hey, at home, back in the Coliseum, 14-point favorites. The season has not gone the way anyone expected after LSU. There is an opportunity here to finish this thing out strong, and that's what the coaches and the players are going to try to do. Riley talked about how on the flight back from Maryland, the staff, they stayed up the whole time and got a head start. I mean, USC fans right now won't be happy to hear anything, but the guys are trying. I mean, that sounds, cliche, but what else can you do at this point? They've underachieved, and Lincoln Riley's the guy. He's the guy in charge. Like, you just kind of got to – it's him or no one right now, and he doesn't think there needs to be a lot of changes. So that's what's going to happen, and we'll see what happens against Rutgers.
I'll play devil's advocate on behalf of the fans in terms of this discussion. I understand that they want change of any kind.
Yeah.
It's hard to make big changes during the season. They've heard all year from us about how the buyout's too big. You can't fire Lincoln Riley. You probably can't fire him even next year, and you're certainly not firing him this year. Hard to fire an offensive line coach during the season because who's going to step up and do that? You can't just go pick one up off the streets and have them install all of their new plans during the year. And if you fire one positional coach, someone else has to pick up the slack, and that means that you're probably taking from an area of strength to fix an area of need. So it makes more sense just to keep the coach that you have. Sometimes you have the option of switching the play caller or the coordinator. USC did that last year. Oklahoma fired its offensive coordinator yesterday. Lincoln Riley's the offensive coordinator too. Like, he's the play caller. So maybe USC could make a change of shifting the play caller. I don't think that's going to happen. So they're looking for change, and the one place to look that they've been told is at least an option is a quarterback change. Because if Lincoln Riley can't be fired, if you can't fire positional coaches or change your coordinators and play callers, the one thing that I guess you technically can change is the quarterback. So I think USC fans are latching on to anything right now, and they want to see a change. And I think we do too. We've been on the record saying Lincoln Riley is stubborn on a lot of things. I know that was a main point for you on Tunnel Vision the other night. I think he is. I think the play calling could be changed, not who's doing it, but just the way that they're calling plays. Not calling 50 pass plays, and not just because 50 is too much, but because you're running the ball too few times. Lincoln Riley's never had an offense that's run the ball this low of an amount in his career, and he's got what I would say is probably the worst offensive line, and at least physically talented quarterback in his time as a head coach or offensive coordinator. So I'm a little surprised that this team isn't running the ball, but I guess that's my playing devil's advocate for the fans on the Miller Moss, the Jaden Maiava quarterback change situation, and let us know if that's the boat that you're in, because I would understand in that sense that you're just looking for some kind of change right now.
I get it, and I'd say run the ball more and just change how you call the offense would be the change that I would make right now. And I was on the record about this before the season. Like, I just didn't think this team had enough talent to be great in the Big Ten, and they've had some injuries, and when it all worked out against LSU, all that time to game plan and everyone was healthy, it looked a lot different. Now, week after week in this more physical conference, more you got to play in the trenches conference. It's just different than the Pac-12, different than the Big 12. USC wasn't set up physically to compete here. So what can you change? I think they've missed the boat, and they probably should have recruited better to this conference in the past. So, I don't want to sound like I'm sticking up for Riley and USC. Of course, things haven't been good enough this year, but I don't know what changes realistically make a whole lot of sense right now. You're kind of stuck with what you got. Yes, you could change the quarterback, and Jack just laid that all out before, but I think changing the play calling, that would probably be where I start. But the whole general gist of what Lincoln Riley said tonight was we're really not going to change too much. The tape is the tape, and we've put a lot of good things on tape.
Outside of the quarterback situation, anything else stand out to you about what Lincoln Riley said, Miller Moss said, or some of the other players that we got to talk to today?
I asked Lincoln Riley if any assistant coaches would change their roles, and he looked at me like I was crazy. So, no, I don't think any assistants are changing. And that was just a way for me, I know he's not going to give up play calling, but, maybe does Matt Entz help with special teams? Or, do you do something different from a coaching perspective? And I felt like that was the best way to ask him, just kind of be direct with it. And it doesn't really sound like any changes are happening there. I talked with Lake McCree. He thought his injury on the road against Michigan was season-ending or had the chance to be. They couldn't give him a straight answer, which is why he was so upset after leaving that game. But, of course, that ended up being okay because he only missed a few weeks. It wasn't a season-ending injury. And USC right away, they threw him the ball in the first play against Maryland Moss did, so it was good to see him back. He seems in good spirits, and he says Miller Moss has handled the adversity well. He felt like Rutgers is well coached, and they're disciplined, and they'll be a tough opponent. He was the only scrum I was in one-on-one. Nothing really stood out to me with him too much, but it's good to have him back if you're USC because he makes a big difference.
Yeah, one thing that Lincoln Riley said that also stood out to me was that this is probably the best week for them to have a short week. It allows them to get over the loss quicker. Deuce Robinson mentioned the same thing as, hey, we have to play on Friday, but if we had to play today, we'd love it. We'd come out roaring and ready to go. Thought that was interesting to hear from Lincoln Riley. He mentioned they did have to change some of the plans around. That's why we're sitting here in the dark as opposed to our normal time around 6 o'clock. But I thought it was interesting to hear how they're handling the short week. I also asked Deuce Robinson about the catch that Jacoby Lane had, the run after the catch that he had and what that does to fuel the wide receiver room. And he says, we're just trying to one-up each other every game. And so when someone makes a play like that, you're amazed, and then you're inspired to go out there and do something similar. I thought Robinson's run after the catch, which ended up being a 25-yard touchdown, I thought that was the play USC had been looking for in previous close losses as one that separated them, gave them the lead, and what could have been a game-winning drive. Now, of course, the field goal gets blocked later, but I thought he has really been a revelation over the past handful of weeks. I think it's 4 touchdowns for him in the last 5 weeks, and he always just continues to say the right thing.
He's been great. That catch by Lane was great. It seemed like the receivers, at least some of them, Mekhi Lemon too, took a step in the right direction. We're still waiting for Zachariah Branch to have that big game. He played well against Michigan, but really hasn't done much since then. So I did think it was a step in the right direction for some of those guys, but Jack, they just have to win games. That's the whole thing here. You can get good play from a guy here, a guy there, but if you're not winning games, then it really doesn't matter about taking steps forward and all of that. So that's really what we'll be looking for against Rutgers. And, I said the same thing last week. If you lose this game, then you got to evaluate everything. But at home inside the Coliseum, this is like the last chance. A loss for Rutgers on Friday night, then clearly USC can't do anything with Riley right now. But then, everything really, really gets bad. And, it's pretty bad right now. So definitely can't afford a loss on Friday.
Yeah, this is, I said, a must-win game on instant after the Maryland game. This is a game USC not only can't afford to lose, but should have no business losing. Rutgers just lost at home to a really bad UCLA team, made Ethan Garbers, or Chase Garbers or Ethan Garbers, I always forget. Ethan Garbers made him look like Superman. So if there's a week to let Miller Moss go out there and regain some confidence, that would be this week. On the other side, Ethan Kaliak-Manis, the Rutgers quarterback, he's a Minnesota transfer. He's never had a season in his career above 54% completion percentage, and normally something like 60% or even 64% is not great in college football. He has just not been good passing the ball in his career. This season in Big Ten play, he's 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, under 50% completion. So USC just has to make sure that doesn't tick up. We have seen bad quarterbacks play well against USC in the past 3 years, so we'll see if that happens. Kind of one-dimensional on offense with the run game and Kyle Monungai. So this is just a game that USC has no business losing. And then you take into account the fact Rutgers has to travel from Piscataway, New Jersey to Los Angeles, maybe the longest trip in this new Big Ten, for a Friday night game. They're leaving on Wednesday.
Can't drop this game, Jack. get to 4-4 and try to finish out the season strong. Another reason why people want Mayava is because let's at least see what we have in him going forward is the mindset of some USC fans, which I understand that. But Lincoln Riley, as he said all along, going to try to be 1-0 every week, and he believes Moss is the guy to have him be 1-0 every week. And this week they have Rutgers, a game that, like we keep saying, they can't afford to lose.
If they do, I'm willing to have the conversation on the quarterback. I'm willing to have a lot of conversations for USC. But Connor's tired. It's been a long day, and we're here late. It's past his bedtime. But thank you guys for hanging out with us in the dark. Alongside Connor Morrissette, I'm Jack Smith. Thanks for watching Instant Analysis. We'll be back tomorrow with another one. Make sure you're checking out USCfootball.com for more.